What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Going the Distance podcast presented by ImmaculateSports.com. Twitter's at ImmacSports.
Instagram is also at ImmacSports.
TikTok, YouTube, Immaculate Sports. It's episode 226. And this week, we're going to make some picks. We got Wild Card Weekend coming up this Saturday, a Final Four for college football, and just so much chaos in the world of NFL football right now. Black Monday yesterday, obviously, carried over a little bit today for your team. We're going to talk about all the teams that may need new coaches, too.
Yeah. Should be a fun one. Playoff predictions is always fun. Same thing on the college side as well, too. But there's a couple of good things that we got to talk about in the opener first. And I'm going to let Skyler go first because I think this thing was probably the best thing for both of us.
Yeah, I was going to say this is probably your opener, too. Sorry if I stole it from you. But, hey, Brent Rooker, 5-year extension for the Oakland A's. It doesn't matter where they're playing. I've gone back and listened. I've actually called them Oakland like 10 times already, so who cares, man? Until they play a game, I'm going to be stuck with it. But this is massive. I was talking with some of the guys last night, trying to remember what was the last one. Alex was like, no, it's Chris Davis. I'm like, I don't know. Does that one even count, man? Chris Davis was cool, but that was like 2 years. I just think back to Eric Chavez. This is a big deal. Cheap contract for a guy, and this is kind of what you have to do if you want to build a new culture, especially in baseball, right? You have to have your captains take a little bit of a pay cut, and I'm happy to see that Brent Rooker's on board with this new rebuild too, because I'm excited to see what's next.
Yeah, it was definitely a cool moment last night getting that tweet from Hassan or Rosenthal, I think it was, who actually broke the news to see that we actually extended Brent Rooker to that 5-year, $60 million contract that could go actually to 6 years and 80-something million. I forget what needs to happen for that to go to the 6th year, but that's obviously way down the road. But it's like a perfect scenario, I'd say, for the A's and Rooker to be able to like get an extension this early for a guy who's already 30 years old but only has like 2 or 3 years of service time. Technically speaking. But since he's pretty much a sole DH, it doesn't really have any defensive value. You're not looking at $30 million a year for this guy. Since it's a pre-arb extension as well, too, you're not going to have to pay him, a ridiculous amount because those first 3 or 4 years are still years that he would have been, guaranteed money from the A's, regardless of what, he wanted to do or not. And it works out well for just the idea of giving somebody out a 5-year contract that's been with your team for a little bit. And I think Brent Rooker's, want to stay with the team kind of comes from the idea that they were the only team that really gave him a full chance in the big leagues, had stops in Minnesota, or that's where he started, but stops in Kansas City and San Diego along in the way to get to the A's roster in 2023, where he made the opening day roster over Christian Pache, which at the time was like a huge what are you doing, Dave Forrest moment, because Pache was the guy that we got in the Olsen trade, of course. That was supposed to be the big deal. It didn't work out for him, but it's obviously worked out as well as it possibly could with Brent Rooker. We saw him have a great 2023 and follow that up with an even better 2024. And it's cool to say that he's sticking around, hopefully for all those 5 years. It would suck to see us trade him like 2 or 3 years from now and just like go through that whole process again. But I like it. It's cool to see. But the next step is giving that same contract or even more, definitely more, to Lawrence Butler and getting him locked up for the foreseeable future. Outside of that, I do want to mention something else because I didn't want to have just one thing for the opener. I guess I'll give my flowers to soon to be named first team All-Pro Brock Bowers for his great rookie season. Just one last time, 112 catches. Third in the NFL, 1,194 yards, led all tight ends this season, and 5 touchdowns as well too. Looking forward to his future. Hopefully, if we get him a quarterback, those numbers will only continue to get larger and larger as the seasons go on. But to know that you drafted a stud in the first round for the first time in a long time feels good because that's not something that the Raiders do too often. And we'll talk more about the Raiders as we get later on in this episode because they did some interesting things today. There were also some other MLB moves that we do want to talk about before we get into the rest of the episode. There wasn't anything crazy. I'm sure if I said, these players without the teams, it wouldn't have even changed your opinion because there wasn't too much. We saw deals for guys like Nick Gordon, Miguel Castro, Charlie Morton signing a 1-year deal with the Baltimore Orioles, Cavan Biggio signing a minor league contract with the Royals. We did see the Dodgers make two, I would say, I guess three moves that were kind of newsworthy. Starting off with Diego Cartaya, former top prospect for the Dodgers, catcher, has kind of fallen off over the last 2 years in the minor leagues. He got DFA'd on the 3rd, and that was kind of newsworthy there. And kind of just the Dodgers, I'd say, kind of continued inability to really pan out their catching prospects specifically, but just there's been a few guys that they've had that just have not panned out that were like these super prospects. I would say it's alarming for them because they can, go ahead and just sign whatever, but definitely thought Cartaya was going to be a stud. It doesn't look like he'll be that way. They also signed Hae-Sung Kim, not to be confused with Ha-Sung Kim, Korean infielder, to a 3-year contract. He seems very versatile, good bat-to-ball skills, good speed. I think I had him predicted to go to the Giants or something like that. He lands with the Dodgers. And then they also made a trade yesterday involving Gavin Lux going to the Cincinnati Reds for a pick and outfielder Michael Sirota. Lux, once again, one of those top-tier prospects, didn't really pan out with the Dodgers. Had a good second half in 2024, finds his way into Cincinnati, and maybe, an everyday role for them, considering how he played in the last 60 games of the season last year. And I guess technically, I'd say the biggest news that we saw just happened about 30, 40 minutes ago when Justin Verlander signed a 1-year deal with the San Francisco Giants. Verlander is supposed to turn 42 next month, so it's not like we're seeing 2013 Justin Verlander go out there for the Giants and pitch 215 innings or whatever it was back then. He's pretty washed at this point. I wouldn't expect him to be posting some sub-3 ERA or something like that, but if he can get 100-plus innings at like a 4.2, 4.3 ERA, that'd be my expectation. So
maybe
Justin
get something
Verlander
at the deadline for him.
Yeah, could happen. We'll see. Maybe the Giants, do what they always do and just don't do anything at the deadline and just hold on to him because they're probably going to be in purgatory again. But I was going to say good move for the Giants, but I really don't have an opinion on that right now because that seems pretty random. Moving on from that, though, probably last baseball that we'll talk this episode. We're getting into our player, defensive player, and rookie of the week as we always do. Some big-time performances in Week 18 in games that mattered for certain reasons, and whether that be draft pick or getting the first seed in the NFC, there were some big performances going on. Starting off with player of the week, Skyler, who'd you choose?
Jahmyr Gibbs was the best player of Week 18, 170 yards from scrimmage, and, of course, 4 big touchdowns for the Lions. Minnesota was completely outcoached by Detroit, and they could not stop Gibbs.
Yeah, I also went with Jahmyr Gibbs, 4 total touchdowns, 139 rushing yards, plus 31 yards through the air. We've talked about this guy just being an amazing running back and kind of not be, I would say, like handicapped or handcuffed from David Montgomery getting carries. But we know with this guy, if he gets the ball 30 times a game, he's going to have 150 plus every single time. And he showed that on Sunday Night Football. Defensive player of the week.
I have an honorable mention for Nate Wiggins of Baltimore. He had a pick 6 on Bailey Zappi in that one. Really great play. But I'm going to go with Bengals edge rusher Trey Hendrickson. 3.5 sacks in a must-win game. Since he didn't end up getting the help they needed to get into the playoffs there, but what a way to clinch that sack crown for him.
Yeah, even though it didn't matter in hindsight, I definitely went with Trey Hendrickson for his 3.5 sack performance on Saturday night. It was just one of those performances where the best players go out in the biggest moments, kind of like what an edge rusher on the opposite team usually does in TJ Watt, who actually had a decent game as well too. But Trey Hendrickson, great season. Probably won't win the DPOY or anything like that, but I could definitely see him getting votes and being either on the first team or second team All-Pro. Next up, rookie of the week. There are some fun options here.
Yeah, I'm going to end up going with Bo Nix, even though he kind of played in more of a preseason environment there against Kansas City. More passing touchdowns than incompletions. It was 321 passing, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a couple really crazy plays on the move.
Yeah. I do want to give a shout out to a guy who's not a rookie, but feels like a rookie still, and that's Bryce Young, who had a 5 touchdown performance in the overtime game against the Falcons. I couldn't really find a way to fit him in any of these awards, but I definitely thought his performance over the last like 6 or 7 weeks has been noteworthy. But my rookie of the week is going to be Joe Milton. His first career start for the Patriots in a game that everybody wanted to lose. And he said, fuck it. I'm not getting you guys the first pick. I'm getting you the fourth pick. Future backup quarterback for the Patriots, most likely, because I don't think they'll start him over Drake May next year. 22 for 29, 241, 1 touchdown through the air and 1 touchdown on the ground against a Bills team that was playing most of their backups, but still an NFL team nonetheless. And he made some plays in this game that really showed, like, yeah, he could be a starting quarterback in the league. Obviously, with him, it's never been the doubt of the ability; it's been the doubt of the consistency. And maybe he wouldn't have that same showing over a 7 or 8 game span, but what he did on Sunday was pretty impressive, especially on the play that got called back where he rolled out left from like 20-yard line, evaded the pressure, kind of reset his feet, and just threw like an 80-mile-per-hour strike to one of the receivers who caught it for a touchdown in a really small window as well too. But ended up not counting because there's a holding penalty. But Joe Milton definitely, I think, deserves to get his flowers for his performance on Sunday.
Nice to know a guy can play at least a little bit.
Yeah. But, I mean, his arm strength, dude, holy fuck. Like that, he was firing missiles where, like, the cameraman was struggling to, like, still pick up the football by the time it was going there. But shout out Joe Milton. Alex once called him future Cam Newton. What that means, we'll never know. But moving on to NFL playoff predictions, we got Super Wild Card Weekend, if you're still calling that. I know they did a few years ago, but I don't know if that still has that coin term to it. But we're starting off with matchups that we know in the AFC Wild Card. Obviously, no Kansas City this week because they are the 1 seed, but we'll start off with 7-seeded Denver going to Buffalo, the 2 seed. How do you think this one plays out?
It's a great matchup on paper because Bo Nix has been really good down the stretch, and their defense has been elite all season long, but it doesn't get more difficult than having to go into Orchard Park in January. If Buffalo plays mistake-free football, this one could look a lot like their Sunday night game against San Francisco. If they can shut down the run game of Denver at all, it's going to get ugly. But I do have Buffalo 38-28. Denver keeps it relatively close.
Yeah, I think this game actually ends up being a bit closer. We'll figure out what my layup and bold prediction are as we go on later into the episode. But the spread's at 8.5 right now. I definitely think it plays closer than that. I can see it definitely being a 1-possession game. But not one of those 1-possession games where it's like Buffalo gets a game-winning field goal and wins like that. Yeah. Like Buffalo's up by 2 possessions and Denver scores a garbage time touchdown to make it a 5-point game with 7 seconds left or something like that. I do think it remains close. I just don't think Buffalo or Denver's ability to run the ball is nowhere near good enough to keep up in the playoffs, especially against a team like Buffalo that has the experience, whether, it's not Super Bowl experience, but has the experience of being in the playoffs, knows what it's going to be like, and is playing at home in front of that Buffalo crowd that we always know is coming to play, or coming to cheer. I guess they're not coming to play, but
coming to set things on fire.
Exactly, in the snow. So I got Buffalo, but I think it is going to be a 1-score game. Next up, another divisional matchup, or not another, but a divisional matchup. Seems we have something in the AFC North every single week. This time we get in the playoffs on Prime Video. How cool. Steelers going to Baltimore to play the Ravens.
Yeah, third matchup of the season for these two. And even though the series is tied, I expect this one to go a lot like matchup number 2 for Baltimore. Lamar Jackson's been the best player in the league for about 2 seasons now. Nobody's going to want to tackle Derrick Henry. They moved Kyle Hamilton back to center field, and now no one can throw on them. The Pittsburgh offense has just been completely out of sync for the whole second half of the season. It's all deep shots and run middle with a bad O line. No flow from the offense, no flow from Arthur Smith. I got Baltimore scoring 40 on them, 41-20.
Yeah, this spread is I believe, the widest spread of any game over the entire weekend at 9.5. And I could definitely see it playing that way. Pittsburgh's offense has been sputtering ever since like mid-season at this point. Baltimore's just gotten better and better as the season's gone on. I think we saw them even 4 or 5 weeks ago doing power rankings when they had 5 losses, and usually at 5 losses at that point in the season meant that you weren't that good. We're like, no, this team is still pretty damn good at football. And to say one that the Raiders beat them is kind of crazy. But going off on a tangent there, the last 4 weeks they've played great football. 3 possession wins in their last 4 games. They haven't played a close game in a while, and I don't think it's going to be close in this one. That run game is too dominant, and the Steelers on both sides is just kind of sputtering at this point. The last game that we have in the AFC is actually the first game that we'll see in real life. It's the number 5 seeded Chargers going to Houston at Energy Stadium to play the Texans.
Houston has been a mess this season. There's no other way to put it. Especially after losing 31-2 at home against Baltimore on Christmas. That one kind of decided for me. I wasn't going to pick them in the 4-5 game. No Diggs, no Dell. Things are going to be very difficult for CJ Stroud. And it feels like the Chargers are just scratching the surface on what this offense can do with Justin Herbert. They had a big win against Denver, kind of their audition into the playoffs. And enough to convince me Jim Harbaugh can win a game in the first round. I got the Chargers 27-13.
Yeah. I'm also going to go with the Chargers in this one. I think the offense of the Chargers has definitely spoken to me over the last 6 or 7 weeks. In the first half of the season, I wouldn't believe in this team in a playoff game. But what Justin Herbert's done with his targets and starting to be a bit more comfortable with not just Ladd McConkey, but also guys like Quentin Johnston and Will Dissly has been pretty impressive. J.K. Dobbins being healthy and fully healthy back now at this point, not just 10 carries or whatever. He's got a pretty good workload these past 2 games. I expect them to be firing there. On the other side of the ball, the Texans offense without 2 of their top 3 receivers in Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell, it's going to be tough to move the ball, especially against the Chargers defense that seems as to have come to play for most of the season at this point. I think the Chargers keep this one low scoring. I think they keep it close. And I think the Chargers win with, I'd say, both teams scoring less than 20 to 25 points. On to the NFC side, I believe we had the same predictions there. That was cool. Yeah. NFC wild card, the first one that we have, 7-seeded Green Bay at 2-seeded Philadelphia. This is a matchup we saw week 1 of the season. However, it was not in Philly. It was in Sao Paulo, Brazil, so it's a bit different here. How do you think this one plays out? Jalen Hurts still in concussion protocol, which we know can be confusing.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really ugly one. Maybe all of these NFC games, to be honest, but both quarterbacks are dealing with the injuries, right? Hurts with the concussion, like you said, and Love with the elbow. He couldn't feel his fingers in that game last week for a little bit. And then also there's Christian Watson with the ACL for Green Bay too. With all these question marks, I'm forced to revert back to things like coaching, offensive line, and of course Saquon Barkley as the tiebreaker. So I'm going to have Philly still winning this one in a really close game, 23-20.
When healthy, I think these 2 teams are pretty similar. I think on the defensive side of the ball, they excel at getting takeaways. And on the offensive side of the ball, they both have a really good run game with their 2 running backs, and usually a really good downfield presence, whether that's Christian Watson and Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs and that whole 5-6 receiver thing that they have going on there in Green Bay, or in Philly with AJ Brown and Devonta Smith and the tight ends that they use as well too. However, without Christian Watson having that more of that downfield aspect, I think it's going to be allowing Philly to play higher up in the box and maybe stop Jacobs at a bit better rate than what teams have been able to do for most of the season when Christian Watson was healthy. On the other side of that, I don't think Green Bay has enough to stop the run attack of Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts. Philly's looked just like that 2022 Philly team ever since, I'd say, week 2 or week 3 of the season. And I'm picking Philly to win this game. I think it'll be close. I think it'll be I would say high scoring, but I think that it'll be right around where the over is at 44.5 right now. So I'll say Philly by 5-6 points. Next one that we got, an interesting matchup because I don't think these two teams played in regular season. It's the Commanders going to Tampa Bay to play the Buccaneers.
I'm not sure if either of these teams are ready for the playoffs right now, but what I do know is that Todd Bowles and the Bucs have been here before. I don't love their slow start against New Orleans, but they've been on a bit of a heater offensively for the past couple weeks. I'm going to take the veteran defensive coach against the rookie quarterback, but it is going to be high scoring, I think. I think this may be the most interesting one. I got Tampa Bay 31-30 over Washington.
Yeah, you could say both these two teams are hot, but I think Tampa Bay has been one of the most confusing teams in the NFL this year on deciding if they're good or not. They started off the season. Actually, no, they played the Commanders week 1. I didn't even realize that. So this is the second matchup that we have of a week 1 game, and that 37-20 win over them. I completely forgot about that. But I'm not going to take Jaden Daniels' first career game too much into account in comparison to what he looks like in 18 games later or whatever it is. But they beat the Lions this year. They got shit on by the Broncos, lost the season series to the Falcons, took the Chiefs to overtime, only lost to the Ravens by 10 points on Monday Night Football, beat a whole bunch of good teams late as well, too, and then lost to the Cowboys just when you thought that they'd blow them out. On the other side, Washington's played probably their best ball over the last 5 weeks, winners of 5 in a row. I trust Shane Daniels at this point. I think Baker's going to turn over the ball a couple of times. And I think just the dual threat ability of Jaden Daniels is going to win them this game and really be, I wouldn't say coming out party because he's been, had some big games already in the NFL, but this is the one where we say, yeah, the Commanders might be winning the Super Bowl in a couple of years. So I'll go Washington to win this one in an upset. On the last game that we have, 5-seeded Minnesota at 4-seeded Los Angeles Rams. This is a game that we actually saw in the regular season as well, too, on Thursday night. I believe they handed the Vikings their first or second loss. How do you think this one plays out?
At one point, the Rams were a big what-if story for this season. A bunch of injuries, but now they're mostly back. And now their young defense has been shutting everyone down outside of Buffalo. Minnesota really got manhandled the other night by Detroit. Now everyone knows how to rattle Sam Darnold. You don't need elite corners. You just got to get in his face. Exactly how they beat him last time. I got the Rams 28-24. No Raheem Morris, no problem for that defense.
Yeah, this is the closest game in my mind, and that looks like what the books are saying as well, too, with the 1-point spread being the closest out of any game this entire weekend. It's on Monday night, which is cool to see because obviously the nation will be watching. I mean, when the Rams are healthy, man, they look so damn hard to beat. And they got both the receivers. They got the running back, or not their backup, but they got the starting running back in Kyren Williams, which really matters. They got a healthy defense that's gotten better throughout the season. And they're playing a Vikings team that really just got demoralized against the Lions team. And I think they maybe lost a bit of their confidence. I wouldn't be shocked if Minnesota wins this game, but I'm going to pick the Rams as well to win this one. Moving into the AFC divisional round, we have the same matchups here, which is cool. 5-seeded Chargers going to 1-seeded Kansas City.
Yeah, they did play a really good game earlier this season, but January football is just a little bit different, and I don't think Kansas City's going to lose their first game, if at all, any game this postseason.
Yeah, like you said, 2 pretty close games in the regular season. I don't really think that matters. I think the Chiefs are going to come correct, whatever weekend that is, January 16th, whatever it is, and get a victory. Will it be by 30 points? Probably not. But what they've done is they've found a good way to win in every single ball game that they've played this year, except for the game against Buffalo, and I'm completely disregarding that one against Denver this past weekend. But I got Kansas City winning this one. Next up, matchup that we've honestly been asking for a while now at this point. This is the 2 MVP candidates left in the league, Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen. This will probably be, I'd say, the most watched game of this round if it were to happen. 3-seeded Baltimore going into 2-seeded Buffalo.
You would expect a really high scoring game. You never really know what the weather's going to be out there. So maybe we don't see scores in the 40s, but I think this definitely favors Baltimore, even on the road. It's not too far away from Maryland if we're talking literal travel time. And we haven't really seen the Bills slow anyone down other than Aaron Rodgers this year, and that's because he can't run. Baltimore is the complete opposite, man. They're going to be able to hold on to the ball that whole game. So I'm going to take Baltimore on the road.
Yeah, this is an interesting matchup because these are two really good teams. But I think how this matchup specifically plays, it plays really well into Baltimore's hands. When they played earlier this year, I believe it was on a Monday night game, Baltimore beat the shit out of them, 35-10. And you could see it right away. Buffalo had no rush attack because Baltimore's got one of the best defenses in the league. And Buffalo still couldn't really do much in the air because they don't have a spectacular receiver to go along with them. I know Josh Allen's been great, but he's going to have to be ridiculously extraordinary to win this game. And I don't think he's going to be able to do it against a rush attack. Includes Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson against the Buffalo defense that's had some struggles this season. I'm taking Baltimore to win, and I would not be shocked if it's a landslide too. On to the NFC side, I believe we have a bit of a different matchup here.
Yeah.
So you have the Rams at Detroit, right?
Yes, sir.
Same as last year. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, two teams that know each other very well, but because Detroit has what looks like the best coaching staff in all of football, again, this is too early to see them go down. We haven't seen a team like this go down in their first game in a while, and I don't think it's here. At some point, the Rams are going to hit a wall with Matt Stafford, and I think that's going to be this game.
For my matchup here, I have six-seeded Washington going into Detroit. I think it'd be a fun matchup. I think it could be a high-scoring affair. But Washington's not nearly as complete as this Detroit team, especially on the defensive side of the ball that we saw just last week from Detroit, getting Alex Anzalone back and how much that meant to them. This is going to be a fired-up Detroit crowd as well, too, being the 1 seed. I'm sure that they're going to be loving that. And so I take Detroit to win this one by, I'd say a blowout, but I'd say 10 to 14 points. Next game, you have 3-seeded Tampa Bay going to 2-seeded Philly, which is a matchup we saw this year, but reversed.
Yeah, another matchup here where the teams are very familiar with each other, even going back to the Tom Brady days in Tampa Bay. But this is where their fun ends too. They have a tendency to randomly give up a 40 spot every now and then, and Philly could definitely run all over this defense. The defense has been much better over the years, right? They've helped rebuild it because when Tom Brady was there, they ended up losing a couple guys after he left. And anyways, I know I'm rambling, but Philly's a pretty bad matchup for the Bucs here, especially if they get off to a slow start.
Yeah. In my matchup, I have the Rams going to Philly, so a bit different here, but still a matchup that we've seen in the past. And I think this matchup plays really well into Philly's hand as well, too. I think the experience that they have on defense is going to, play numbers when it goes against the Rams and their young defense. It's going to be really tough to stop an option of Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley while still having to focus on A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert and even maybe Calcaterra as well, too, who gets some targets in that system. So I'm saying Philly gets the win. I think it'd be a decently high-scoring game. I wouldn't say a shootout, though. And the AFC Championship, I believe we have the same thing here. 3-seeded Baltimore at 1-seeded Kansas City, and I believe we have the same NFC Championship, too. But how do you think the AFC Championship plays out?
Probably like it usually does when it's hosted at Arrowhead. Unfortunately, I don't think any AFC team is really built to beat Kansas City. Hey, Lamar Jackson's having a fantastic season. If he can put together another one of those perfect passer rating games and it just happens to fall against this Kansas City team, that'd be great. But Kansas City doesn't even need to score more than 24 points usually to win. And I don't think it's Baltimore's year, unfortunately, but it's probably their best shot if we're talking hypotheticals.
Yeah, when we saw Baltimore and Kansas City play, that was a long time ago. First game of the season, Thursday night. It was a very weird, when you look at it from the full season perspective, like how Baltimore's game plan went. I know they were down early, so they kind of had to throw, but Lamar threw the ball 41 times. He had 122 rushing yards. Derrick Henry only had 13 carries. Isaiah Likely had that ridiculous game that caused everybody to pick him up in fantasy, including you.
Yeah.
9 catches for 111 yards and a touchdown. And then on the other side, Kansas City didn't really run the ball too much, only had 72 rushing yards and fed the ball to Rashee Rice and their new playmaker and Xavier Worthy, who had 2 touchdowns in that game. Since then, Baltimore's figured out how to run their offense. I think we're really experimenting on how to navigate a guy who's a downhill runner with a quarterback who's usually in the shotgun. And that's not something that they really had. They've always had a lot of zone schemes there and kind of just these rotating running backs. They started to play power football in the following weeks after that, and that's why we saw the Ravens go on the run that they did at the end of the regular season. I think the Ravens have gotten a lot better since this game. It's so tough to pick against Kansas City, but if I'm going to, I'm going to pick the Ravens to win this one. So I think it's close, but I think Baltimore's got the ability to do it this year, unlike they did last year. On to the NFC side, 2-seeded Philly at 1-seeded Detroit. This is a perfect matchup, a fun one. 2 fan bases that are very passionate and can be very annoying at times too. But how do you think this one plays?
Yeah, this one should be awesome, right? Both defenses are a little banged up, but the offenses are perfect, well-oiled machines here. And the reason why I'm going to pick Detroit, another 1 seed, is because basically Aaron Glenn. And I mean, he just knows exactly what makes every quarterback in this league tick. And we've seen a bad Jalen Hurts game, not in a couple of weeks now, but we know that it can blow the game up immediately. If you have Jalen Hurts making bad decisions, they don't have a chance in this one, unfortunately. The one thing is, though, it seems like every single game Detroit plays, they're getting another great defensive player carted off. So if this keeps happening, at some point we're going to have to pick against them, right? But I'm still riding with Detroit. It seems like this is their year, and this is kind of the matchup, whoever wins the AFC side, that everyone wants to see.
Yeah, this is a very interesting game. I wrote down my pick, and I was like, I really don't know, because this game is so like perfect when you're writing the game script. You got 2 of probably the most talented running backs in the league. I know no shot to Derrick Henry, but Jahmyr Gibbs and Saquon Barkley are just the full package when it comes to those runners. 2 quarterbacks who have had some interesting trajectories in their career, but now, probably undebatably playing some of the best ball of their career. 2 top pass catchers in A.J. Brown and Amon-Ra St. Brown. 2 good tight ends, Sam Laporta and Dallas Goedert, and 2 defenses that have had struggles at times. But I think there's been a bit more struggle on the defensive side and a bit more battling of injury on that side as well too, which is going to make me pick Philly in this one. And I mean, if we get this matchup, Championship Sunday, if we get Baltimore, Kansas City, Philly versus Detroit, like, oh my gosh, are my eyes going to be glued to the TV? But I guess the monitor, I don't have a TV, but I'm picking Philly in this one. No offense, Shami. I love your team, but I mean, I have a Kelly Green, Jalen Hurts jersey, so I got to be repping it out for him, right?
All right.
Moving to the Super Bowl, we have actually opposite matchups. You have Kansas City versus Detroit. I have Baltimore versus Philly. How do you think Kansas City versus Detroit plays out? Blue blood versus blue blood right now.
Yeah, you pick the shootout game. I'm picking the complete chess match. I'm getting Patriots-Rams vibes from this game. And the unfortunate part about that is Jared Goff looked really bad. And I know it's like a brand new Jared Goff, but the only evidence we have of him against the best defense in the league in a game where if you don't score on this drive right now, your season is over. He hasn't really come through. So I'm unfortunately going to have to pick Kansas City, but I'll be rooting for Detroit all the way. I think that this Kansas City defense is special. Like we've talked about, Detroit's was special. Now they're missing over half of the guys they thought they would have in this game. And we still don't know about guys like Terrion Arnold, just got carted off the other day. Hutchinson with the fractured leg. I don't think I can pick Detroit.
Yeah. If Mahomes has the ball less than 2 minutes and down by less than 8 points, you're fucked. I'm sorry, but that's just how it goes, especially in the playoffs. Um, Luckily for me, I don't have them in my scenario here because I have, the Ravens holding the ball for the last 9 minutes of that ball game and just getting 4 yard carry after 4 yard carry to close that one out. But my Super Bowl, Baltimore versus Philly. This is a fun matchup, and I know I've said that so many times already. We saw this in the regular season, which is good. So we have a bit of, I guess, tape, if you want to call it that. And it was a very interesting game for Philly when they won that one because Jalen Hurts only threw the ball 19 times, only had 118 yards, and they won. On the other side of the ball, Lamar Jackson had more yards, more touchdowns. Derrick Henry didn't necessarily have a bad day. It was an interesting game. It's just Justin Tucker missed 2 kicks. Was really how it went. And if he made both, they would have won by 1 point. Man, this is a toss-up. I'm going to say, because there's no Devonta Smith in this game, that Philly holds on if they're fully healthy in this one and wins. In a super close game, I don't think we would see – I think if we saw this matchup, people would be like, oh, my God, we're going to get an extreme shootout. But since these two offenses are so run-heavy, I think there's going to be a lot of chewing and a lot of 40-second play clocks that we see go down to 1 before the ball snaps rather than pace and stuff that we might see from maybe not Detroit as much because they run the ball a lot too, but Kansas City I think would use a lot of pace and some of the other teams as well too. But I'm going Philly to win. And Super Bowl MVP, Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, obviously would be Patrick Mahomes for me. Or maybe Harrison Butker.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. NFL is not going to take that. If they get a chance to give Mahomes a Super Bowl MVP, they're going to give it to him. And I'm not going to be a hater either. I'm not a hater. Mahomes is, generational talent, but I need to see him lose, man. It's been too long. We're not supposed to have repeats. Yeah. It's supposed to, if we got a 13-6 Super Bowl, man, that'd be unfortunate. But we talked about all the good teams. So now let's talk about all the bad teams and their dysfunctional scenarios that me and Skylar's teams often, or not often, all the time find ourselves in, unfortunately. So we're going to go over good fire, bad fire, or should have been fired, or should be fired because coaches are still getting fired, as we found out today, not just on Black Monday, it's also Black Tuesday as well, too. We'll start out, we're just going the teams picking first 10. We'll start from the first pick. Brian Callahan, his first year in Tennessee, was an interesting move last year when they fired Vrabel, close. Just a different start. But they did fire their GM. Do you think Brian Callahan should have been fired too?
I think this was the right decision. If you were going to fire someone, it shouldn't be the Callahans, right? Rand Carthen, GM, very interesting move, right? Lots of talk online because he made some great moves. But the Callahans weren't brought here to fix Will Levis. They were brought here to fix the offensive line and the running game, which was improved a lot. Tennessee knows this roster was a dumpster fire from the Vrabel departure, and they need a couple more years.
Yeah, I'll start with the GM as well, too. I actually like what the Titans did in this offseason. I thought bringing in Tony Pollard and trying to, focus on the run game when you don't really have the greatest passing attack was a good idea. And on the defensive side of the ball, I thought they did a lot of good things. I thought the L'Jarius Sneed trade was good. I thought some of the extensions that they handed out were smart decisions. And I thought this Tennessee defense, albeit it was a solid group, allowed a lot of points because of some unfortunate turnovers by the offensive side of the ball, was still a solid group in my opinion. On the offensive side, I mean, these guys were doomed for the start, right? When you have Will Levis and Mason Rudolph as your two options, it didn't really – you weren't really dealt pocket aces. You were kind of dealt like a 3 and a 5 or something like that. You were in a good spot. I like the keeping Brian Callahan. I probably would have kept the GM as well too. So I'd say they did a decent job here. Next up, second pick, Kevin Stefanski, former coach of the year. What do you think?
This is not a Stefanski problem. I'm fine with keeping him. Like you mentioned, coach of the year winner. This isn't a quarterback problem. or excuse me, this isn't a Stefanski problem. It's a quarterback problem. They need to get them all out of town. Watson, Winston, DTR, Zappy, all of them. Clean it out. Even if you have to go with Kirk Cousins and Jalen Milroe, that's better than what you have. And I trust Stefanski to work with whoever's playing quarterback if they get rid of these guys. That's for sure.
Yeah, I thought it was a good keep here. If we saw Kevin Stefanski got fired, I think there would have been a lot of scratching your head, especially
He'd be
not
going
just
to the
from
Jets.
around the NFL, but around the NFL fans as well too. I think general consensus around him is that he's a good coach. Dealt with a lot of injuries this year. Dealt with some tomfoolery, to say the least, by his quarterback. And just got dealt a shitty hand this year. So I like keeping Stefanski. I like that they just didn't go based off the record on this one. Next one, maybe a different situation here. Brian Dable stays with the Giants. They've already put out a statement, so we're not going to see him fired next week. Or maybe we do. Who knows? But you never really know with this team. But as for now, Brian Dable stays the Giants head coach another year.
Well, the GM probably should have been fired, but I'm not 100% in that direction on Brian Dable yet. Tommy DeVito and Drew Lock are not really viable quarterback options if you want to make a serious run to the playoffs. So I'll say that keeping Dable was the right decision if they're able to get a good veteran this year. Obviously, we have no clue what's going on with the draft. We'll talk about a little mock draft later on in the show here with the top 10 at least, but most of these teams don't even have a GM right now. So it's really hard to say who's going to move up for a quarterback. So, if you're able to bring someone like Geno Smith back, they could probably make the playoffs. If you don't, everyone probably gets fired next year.
I like keeping Dable because I do think he's a good head coach, but I don't know how you don't fire the GM. I mean, this was a playoff team 2 years ago. And since then, you extended the quarterback, waived the quarterback. You didn't offer a contract or a reasonable contract to one of the organization's best running backs of all time, if not, the most talented running back that we've seen since Adrian Peterson. The defensive side of the ball was in shambles this entire season. I get that you drafted Malik Neighbors and you hit on a shot in the dark where kind of anybody that you picked was going to be great. Because we saw their draft room and stuff say this kid wanted not Jaden McDaniels, that would be weird, Jaden Daniels, and not having that go. And just that whole situation was so messy. Is it Kafka or whatever? Or who's their owner? Yeah, I'm firing Schoen, their GM, like 7 weeks ago, or even 365 days ago once he let Saquon Barkley walk. I think keeping Dable's a good choice, but there had to have been some person to blame here.
John Mara.
And
that's his name.
That's it. Yeah. Kafka's some OC.
He's the OC.
Yeah. But Mara, dude, you should have. How can you have this go? I mean, if you're in Tennessee, this is a problem. You're in the biggest market in America, in New York, and you just said you're okay with that 3-15 or 3-14 season. It's not a good look, and I know Giants fans aren't happy. I don't blame them, but fuck them. So sorry. Next up, New England Patriots fire Gerard Mayo.
Bit of a shocker here, but then again, Robert Kraft is one of the most impatient guys in all of football, so maybe not a shocker to us. Especially if you're able to get a Ben Johnson or a Mike Vrabel. I think at the end of the day, it's a W. It's just kind of sad the way that it all went down. He's supposed to be the heir apparent. He didn't even get a real shot. So emotionally, yes, but I don't think the Patriots are going to be losing anything X's and O's wise here.
Yeah. With them firing Gerard Mayo, I definitely think it says they have something up their sleeve, whether that's Vrabel or Ben Johnson or, I don't know, Pete Carroll or somehow getting Belichick back in the building, even though he already signed. Kraft's got a plan, I believe it, because he would not just fire Gerard Mayo for no reason. And I think everybody kind of understood that Mayo was dealt probably the worst hand in the NFL. Didn't have a good defense, didn't have a star player on both sides of the ball, had a rookie quarterback who's talented, but had no weapons to throw to, no run game to rely on. It was just kind of thrown into a shit spot. However, if you do have that, ace up your sleeve like we think Kraft does, I do say it's a good fire with Gerard Mayo because I don't. I mean, I would say I don't believe in him because they're just not like the tangible ability to say like I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say, but it's a good fire. But I do think Gerard Mayo was a good coach. Yeah, I'll say that.
Mhm.
Next up, Jacksonville. They finally got rid of Dougie P.
Yeah, this one's expected, of course, right? And I think that Doug Peterson is a good play caller, but that quarterback whisperer archetype, if you will, from the head coach position hasn't really worked out for anybody over the past 10 years. And you would imagine they're probably looking for a defensive minded guy now. Apparently, the interview with Sala went pretty well. I'm sure they'll be all in on Flores, Aaron Glenn, all of that. So it all depends on Trevor Lawrence, right? Also, I think their owner's a dick, by the way. He said something about the Jets. I'm like, dude, you try to move a team to England. Shut up.
What an interesting coaching lifetime for Doug Peterson. Just going back the last 10 years in Philly, wins the Super Bowl, and then has everything fall apart and gets fired. Signs with Jacksonville, and everybody's like, yeah, that's a good hire. This is a guy who won a Super Bowl. Philly has that year where they take Jacksonville to the playoffs. We're like, okay, Trevor Lawrence, Doug Peterson, that's going to be a duo that's around for a while. And then everything just falls apart. And then it falls apart again the next year. And you're like, okay, we need someone to blame. Doug Peterson is the right guy to blame, in my opinion. So I say it's a good fire, but just a very interesting coaching lifetime for him with his, I don't know, the connotation around him has changed a lot, up and down over the past 10 years. Next up, Antonio Pierce. We saw it happen today. He got fired. I was making my notes yesterday when this was happening, so they're a bit different here, but I obviously have some raw opinions on this one.
Yeah, it's funny. I was like almost to the Raiders on my notes when the news came out. I'm like, thank God I didn't like do a whole bunch of research on like guys AP would possibly want to bring in next year. But anyways, it's kind of too early to tell the direction that AP was going to try to push this team into because it's kind of all about the ownership these days with Mark Davis and Tom Brady. But here's the thing. Sometimes it's not the head coach's fault and he still needs to go. There's a lot of great options out there. This team clearly needs a change of identity, and we'll be doing mock drafts for the next 4 months here. But just like a surprise here, maybe a team that used to not value a running back could be in on Ashton Genty. Maybe a team that doesn't like trading up will go try to get Shadur Sanders. That's the beauty of a new regime, right?
Yeah. My opinion on Antonio Pierce has always been there is no real scheme around him, but there is a big emotional aspect. And we saw that when he was named the interim coach last year when McDaniels got fired. We saw that especially when he became the head coach this past year. There's a lot of just fuck yeah from the fans or from even the players too. That kind of evaporated very quickly throughout the season with various reasons, but I think the biggest problem I had with AP was just his decision making and 2-minute scenarios. We saw a lot of very conservative moments from the offense when there's times like, hey, we're down 10 points before half and we have 3 timeouts, 50 seconds left. Let's not just run the ball 3 times down the middle. Let's try to take a shot for one of our guys, and Brock Bowers, Jacoby Myers, or even Devontae when he was here. But I think what you said is a good point, though. I think some good coaches or decent coaches still do need to be fired, and this was one of them. I don't think he was going to get the job done long term, and this now gives us the ability to go hire a Vrabel, who I would like, or hire a Ben Johnson, who I don't think would happen, but would be an interesting one, or Liam Cohen, who's been a big name, or even Brian Flores. And I think those coaches give you more ability than what AP had. The only downside, I think, from this could be that culture aspect. And one of the biggest guys, culture leader for the Raiders, is Max Crosby. And now through his time, he's seeing Gruden be here. He's seeing Gruden get fired, or not fired, but resign. We saw Rich Bisaccia then take us to the playoffs that year and then not get hired back. We saw Josh McDaniels come in, have his whole Patriot way, have it not work for jack shit, and get fired. We saw AP come in, bring up the culture. Everybody's so happy to have him here. Good vibes at the end of last season, and then they're gone. And I think that's what can sometimes spark a request of a trade, which would absolutely suck to see Max Crosby be traded. But I think it's a real possibility now that AP has been fired. It would suck. But Tom Telesco, if you trade the man, please get 3 first-round picks from somebody. Like it's a necessity at that point. But it's a close to another chapter. But hopefully, Max Crosby trusts the process one more time, and things get going in the right direction for the first time in my lifetime with the Raiders. Next up, your team and your fire that you got over there. The New York Jets. Robert Saleh obviously got fired midway through the season. Jeff Ulbrich was named the interim. I'm not sure exactly what his record was, but he was an emotional head coach as well, too. What do you think the scenario should be here?
What a disaster of a season, right? Saleh and Ulbrich almost get fired last year, but the Rodgers injury helps everybody live for another season, and that didn't even work for Robert Saleh, right? I can't imagine we'll be hiring any coaches soon because we still don't have a GM. And so far, the Jets are going to interview as many people as possible because I heard Gruden say this on a podcast too recently. Sometimes the interview is more important than the actual selection. You hear like, hey, Pete Carroll, come over. Like, what would you do in our situation? Just hypothetically. And it's like, oh, I didn't think about that. There's about 25 guys on the list. Ulbrich is not going to come back. He's probably going to get an interview. You can consider it his closing interview, but the defense completely fell apart when Saleh left, and it sucks because I like Brick, but you're going to have to find somebody who's willing to work with Woody Johnson. Again, I don't think he's a dickhead like some other owners, but he definitely has to have his hands on the team or he's going to flip out. So I'm okay with Josh McCown, but I really hope they take a harder look at some of the other guys. Aaron Glenn has a history there, right? Brian Flores, we were just talking about this before the show. He's like the only guy who was being honest about how bad Tua was over the past 5 years. And he said, F your tank. I'm going to try to win as many games as possible. That's the kind of energy we need in the building. It's what Sauce Gardner needs, man, so he doesn't leave. And
yeah.
Just don't expect anything soon. This is going to be a long project.
Yeah, I do definitely think Ulbrich gets that courtesy interview. Will it mean anything? I don't know. What the vibes will be in the interview, I don't even know either. I think you'll probably know he won't get it. But this is probably the most polarizing job that's open in the head coach. Maybe Chicago, I think, is another one too. But you walking into a very interesting and unique situation if you're going to be the next head coach of this team, because it's not like, all right, you got your young quarterback, you got, this team that you can kind of just mold. The roster's like kind of set outside of Rodgers. It feels like you got talent on both sides of the ball, some free agents, but nothing too crazy if I remember correctly. But Aaron Rodgers is like, let's talk about the elephant in the room here. Like he's
gone.
He's the hinge on all this stuff. If he decides to stay or something, I mean, I'll be shocked at this point. I think he's probably going to retire. But everything hinges on that. And I don't think they hire a head coach until Rodgers says he's back or not, because I think that's going to change.
Good point.
A lot of coaches want their quarterback. They want their choice of who's going to lead their team. And I think at this point in his career, Aaron Rodgers kind of looks like a red flag because there's a lot of distractions that come with him. And, maybe the football is still decent. And, he's threw, 4 touchdown passes on Sunday? Like, that was cool to see. But there's always going to be something with Aaron Rodgers. And I think if you're a first-year head coach in New York with a team like the Jets, you can't have that big distraction going around. But if it is Aaron Rodgers coming back, I do think they go for a guy who has experience in the head coaching position. I don't think they'd hire, a first-time head coach with a roster like that. I think they'd go for a guy who
has been around the block
once or twice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say
Ron Rivera.
Hey, we interviewed him, man. I got to give a shout out before we move on to Todd Downing. All the Raider fans are like, good luck with him, man. That guy's a disaster. But not everyone can step in and be able to call plays for Aaron Rodgers and have the room under control. At least to me, it felt like the defense were the ones who were going crazy, talking online, having all the injuries. So to go from dead last in offense to about 13, I gotta give a shout out to him wherever he ends up. Good for him, man. He didn't fold like the rest of the team did, like Hackett did. He gave up.
Yeah. Next up, a very easy choice, I would say, with Dave Canales in Carolina.
Yeah, great decision. Carolina scores a ton of points after Bryce Young comes back from his benching earlier in the year, and they're definitely trending upwards. I don't have a whole lot of notes for them. I'm excited to see what comes next because that South has been open for a while now, and now we got Bryce Young, Michael Penix playing some good football over there.
Yeah, definitely keep here. Not a ton of talent on the team. I think Dave Canales did a really good job this year of working with Bryce Young through his mistakes, not just against his mistakes, and benching him and then not playing him the rest of the season. We saw Bryce Young get that opportunity, and whatever they did with him definitely worked because he was playing the best ball that we've seen him play in the National Football League in his 2 years and over those last few weeks of the season. Was dealt with shitty hand on the defensive side of the ball with the injuries, trades of Brian Burns and Derek Brown. I got hurt in training camp, I believe, as well too, or very early in the season, one of their best defensive players, and just not a lot of weapons on offense outside of Chuba Hubbard as well too, who really wasn't considered a weapon going into the season. So a lot of work to do for Dave Canales, but I definitely think he's going to get, I'd say at least, if everything doesn't go into dumpster fire, he's got at least 2 more years in my mind. Next up with New Orleans, another team that fired their head coach in the middle of the season with Dennis Allen. We saw Darren Rizzi come in there and have another emotional guy. I feel like that's a theme with these interim head coaches. But Darren Rizzi, keep him, not keep him, who knows?
They were maybe even a couple years too late on firing this regime, in my opinion. When I see that Aaron Glenn skips town for Detroit, and they're not what they are today, to become their defensive coordinator, I figured that New Orleans was cooked for a while. But bringing Aaron Glenn back would change all of this. I think that would be a great fit for them. Another team that doesn't have the quarterback, another team with a lot of injuries and some aging guys. So another project situation, of course, but it was the right decision. They could have brought back a couple of guys and done the same BS over again where they go 6-11 or whatever. But Rizzi probably not coming back. Honestly, I think the Jets are interviewing for a potential coordinator spot if we end up with Aaron Glenn. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and another interesting spot here, way different than some of the other teams because I think this roster where it is in a really tough spot. We've known that New Orleans is a ticking time bomb for about 5 years now with that roster and their salary cap issues, and we're starting to see it happen over the past, I'd say, 2 years where it's really starting to affect the players that they have on their team. And I wouldn't be shocked if we see a scenario here where it's another one of those scapegoat type coaches after a year where you get your year.
You get Arch.
You have a really shitty season, you fire that guy, and then you go get whoever the top coordinator is next year. You have the number 1 pick, and you're set. You have this whole brand new scenario. I think whoever they bring in, you can't really do anything either because of the money situation too. It's not like he can just, or she, you never know. They could do that, but it's a very interesting situation there, and I think it's lining up for one of those one and done type scenarios with Houston and David Coley, or I think his first name was David, but Coley when they had him before they got
could be a Vance Joseph spot, maybe. Could be
like a Leftwich or Pep Hamilton, or I don't even who would be an interesting guy there. I don't know, but I don't think we're seeing Ben Johnson go to New Orleans this year. I'll say that. Next up, Chicago. Speaking of Ben Johnson, they've been wanting him. They got rid of Matt Eberflus in the middle of the season. Thomas Brown took over and was kind of like the most quiet head coach in the league, I would say. I feel like I've learned absolutely nothing about Thomas Brown in his time as the Bears head coach or interim head coach. But They got a long offseason ahead too.
Yeah, I'm okay with this. You don't want your young quarterback to have to change systems every year, but the OC was already gone way before Eberflus. So I agree. Get rid of them all. Thomas Brown was all right. He'll probably get a couple interviews. Maybe he's your New Orleans guy. Honestly, he'd be perfect. But I agree. You got to get yourself a no nonsense veteran coach to change the culture. And just like I've mentioned with the Jets all season long, just like I've mentioned with the Raiders before too, this team is ready for some changes.
Yeah. This is a scenario where you have the quarterback, right? Like Caleb Williams is going to be the guy. I think we saw that this year. Whether the number, I mean, he had honestly pretty good numbers as well too, but I still feel like there's a lot of negative talk around Caleb Williams for the entirety of the season. I thought he played great. I thought he did, some of the most extraordinary playmaking out of any quarterback this entire year. And as a rookie, to have that awareness, I thought was really cool. Sometimes he held on to the ball too long. What they did later in the season, I thought was really good with getting the ball to DJ Moore as soon as you possibly can. We saw a lot of shorter throws to him. I definitely think that's something that we'd see in the future as well too with that duo. But this is going to come down to what interview candidate loves Caleb Williams the most and genuinely loves, not just like this fake love to
Rex
get the
Ryan.
job, but like you got to fall in love with that guy because there's no other option with him. That's your guy. You're gonna have to stick with him. And I think there's definitely going to be a head coach out there that says, yeah, we can make it work with this guy. And the defense as well, too, that's honestly pretty solid. I think whoever's coming in there isn't going to have to change too much. I think it's a scheme thing. The roster seems good to me. That's the top 10 picks. I don't have anyone else to talk about. Maybe Mike McCarthy would be an interesting one. Do you have any other coach that you would like to talk about that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, I'd probably fire Mike McCarthy. Again, it's always tough when the quarterback gets hurt. It basically guarantees you some more time. But the fact that they denied that interview request just to go talk to another team is kind of weird.
Yeah. I mean, Jerry Jones he's done some questionable things in the past. We know that. So
Yeah.
wouldn't be the first weird thing he did.
Mm-hmm. And Minnesota should not trade their coach, by the way.
Yeah. I think that was one of those Jay Glazer reports that feels like very, very much it was like they could possibly be listening to offers or they might get offers for Kevin O'Connell. Like it said nothing about the Vikings' actual interest to move him. I think it's just Jay Glazer being Jay Glazer and trying to get some clicks, as that bald man always does. Moving on, though, to our college football picks, because we have that this week as well, too. We have the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl, two of the biggest ones in the land of the CFP. Starting off with Notre Dame versus Penn State. How do you think this one plays?
I think Penn State's defense has looked like possibly the best unit in the nation this season. They didn't even have Abdul Carter for the last 3 quarters of that Boise game, and they completely shut them down, right? Genty ended up breaking about 15 tackles, got over 100, because Genty's going to do what Genty does. But in that first half, he was not himself. Notre Dame does just enough with the running game to take down Georgia. But I think if Penn State slows down the Irish rushing attack like they did, and they go up early, they could hold on 27-24. And that's what I'm going to go with.
I'm going to lean the other side because I've been big on Notre Dame this year. I thought what the Fighting Irish defense did against Georgia's offense was pretty telling. And I know it was Gunnar Stockton getting his first career start in a meaningful game. And it's not that he looked terrible and that he was clueless out there. But Notre Dame just did such a good time on offense of just holding the ball and not making the big mistake and waiting for Georgia to make a bad play. And I think that's something that aligns well with the Penn State matchup because Drew Allar's made mistakes. He did it in the Oregon game. He's did it in the game versus SMU. He didn't look that good either. And I think that plays right into Notre Dame's hands. So I think Notre Dame wins this one. I don't think, again, we're going to see, ridiculous high-scoring game. But I do think the Fighting Irish pull us out and move to the national championship. Next one, Friday night, the Cotton Bowl, Ohio State versus Texas. 2 fun ones.
It's kind of hard to go away from the Buckeyes at this point after they destroy number one Oregon 41-21 in the Rose Bowl, while Texas has another questionable game, double overtime against Arizona State. So I'm going to take Ohio State 38-20. The offense is humming so well with Will Howard right now. And I don't think they're going to be afraid of playing, against Texas in Texas. I saw a clip of them. They were practicing snap counts with crowd noise. I'm like, that's perfect, man. Everyone makes fun of Ryan Day, but they're ready for this one.
Yeah. I think if we saw this matchup on, the schedule and we did not watch the first two games from Texas, we'd say, yeah, this is going to be a really good game. One of the best defenses in college football. With Texas going up against a star-studded offense with Ohio State, with the quarterback who hasn't looked the greatest in the regular season. But that narrative's changed a ton. What Will Howard did against Oregon was really good, albeit not the greatest defense with the Ducks, but did a very complete job of that game, getting the ball to his playmakers and utilizing Jeremiah Smith. And Texas's defense just did not look the way that we expected it to against Arizona State. I thought it was going to be a blowout. That game went to overtime. Like, that was not at all what I expected in that game. And I would not be shocked if Ohio State just runs through Texas like they did Oregon, because that Texas offense is nowhere near where Oregon is.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Moving on from that, we're going to the second half, and Skyler's got a mock draft.
I do. This was basically right after we found out what the official order, at least for the non-playoff teams, was going to be. So things have already kind of changed, right? With Tyreek Hill wanting to leave. Oh, no, now he's not anymore. Coaches and GMs getting fired. But let's just get right into it. And I didn't have any trades in this one. We're going to be doing mock drafts all the time. Alex already told me he wants to do a dual mock draft where we rotate picks, and try to battle each other. And
he's been loving mock drafts recently.
I know, right? But so this is going to be relatively simple. We'll start off with the Titans. They kind of have to take Cam Ward here, I think. I thought maybe this was a potential Sam Darnold spot. It's looking more and more like they're going to have to franchise tag him just in case JJ McCarthy is still hurt. So, yeah, another team that could trade their pick, of course. I think number 2, Cleveland, is the top trade scenario here. We could see the Giants moving up one spot, Raiders coming to get a quarterback, maybe even the Jets. I don't know. We don't even know who's going to coach for them. But right now, I'm going to give them who I think is the best player in that spot, Abdul Carter. If Myles Garrett leaves, you are fucked. So I think you might as well start trying now to build another one, because like I said earlier, Kirk Cousins might be better than all these quarterbacks in this class, even coming off his injury, and they could get him for very cheap. And number 3, that leaves Shedeur Sanders to the Giants. Again, I probably wouldn't take him in this spot in a normal draft, but hey, these are the best guys we have. The Giants kept their GM. That means they have to draft a quarterback, or everyone's fired. Everyone's gone. Again, there's a couple guys, if they happen to flip Aaron Rodgers over there, or Geno Smith, like I said, or maybe Sam Darnold. I don't know if he goes back to New York though, actually. But Sanders seems like the perfect fit with the Giants. He wouldn't be afraid to go in there. Patriots at number 4. Seems like I'm flipping my pick for them all the time, but I'm actually going to take not Travis Hunter. I'm taking Kelvin Banks Jr., tackle from Texas. I think if you can't keep Drake May upright, then the whole thing is going to fail either way. Another team that could possibly trade. I'm starting to think more and more as we get closer to the draft. Travis Hunter probably not the best fit for them anymore. But Jacksonville at 5 is ecstatic. They'll probably play him at corner immediately and have some plays for him on offense too. I think Travis Hunter, maybe not the Surtain type of prospect that Alex keeps calling Will Johnson, but definitely a polarizing figure, right? Number 6, the Raiders. This one I have no clue, to be honest with you. But Will Johnson's still here. I know that their front 7 is pretty good. There's a couple free agents, maybe Kuntz, Diablo, but I think they should keep all those guys and work around it. We'll figure out who's going to coach for them. Like I said, this could be a Genty spot. This could be a Mason Graham spot, but shit, man, I don't think they're going to take Ted McMillan anymore.
I like Ted.
I do too, and that's why I have him going to the Jets, because if Rodgers is gone, that means Devontae Adams is gone. Again, at the end of the day, they're going to want to trade back probably a couple of times. They've lost picks over the years. A couple are owned by the Raiders, so congrats.
Where does
Again, no,
Devontae go? Saints?
dude, no. I don't know. Wouldn't you want to
Bills?
play in Pittsburgh? Yeah,
Fuck no.
dude. Buffalo would be interesting.
Buffalo makes
Houston?
sense. I don't
No.
know.
Chargers?
Oof.
I know you don't want to do that.
That would hurt,
Yeah.
dude. That would really hurt. I could see Buffalo. I could see. Oh man, Minnesota, Detroit, something like that. I don't know. Going back to Green Bay could be an option. That's
Sure.
realistic.
Sure.
I don't know. A lot of teams could use a good receiver.
Yeah. All right. Well, the next team up here is Carolina at 8. We touched on this a little bit. The defense is an absolute mess. I have Mason Graham here. They could easily take an edge rusher. They would 100% rush Abdul Carter up there, but he's not available. So we'll go with Mason Graham. At 9, it's the Saints. Touched on it a little bit. Probably looking for a defensive minded coach, you would think. I have Jalen Walker, Georgia, linebacker slash edge. If you look at the grades, he's like a 90% edge rusher, even though only half of his snaps were there. So someone's going to take a shot on this guy. Athletic freak. At 10, the Bears, they need O-line. I ended up going with Josh Simmons. He's been out. He's a left tackle for Ohio State, but he is a tackle 100%. Will Campbell from LSU. I actually think he might stay at guard the whole time. There were some clips at the end of the season where he's just getting beat by guys who can bend. His arms weren't long enough. So why not take an all-pro guard for the Niners? Could definitely play tackle if you wanted him to, but in my opinion, I see Zach Martin. Uh, yeah, there's a couple of guys I will say I think will go higher than people expect. Siobhan Ravel, East Carolina corner, with Benjamin Morrison, dude, he had hip surgery. Like he could go anywhere from pick 15 to the 6th round. So I don't
Mm.
know if I feel comfortable mocking him that high here. Nick Emanwari, safety from South Carolina. I've heard he could go in the top 20. So a guy who's been on mock drafts to the Jets, 2nd or 3rd round, looking like that's probably not possible. Jihad Campbell, edge from Alabama. He's been their captain over there on that defense, so I think he could go a little higher. And same with Josh Connerly, tackle from Oregon. I have him going 32 to Kansas City. Don't mess around with the receivers. Don't take Isaiah Bond. That'd be a mistake. Go replace your tackle who holds every single play. And right, all of
Yeah,
this is probably going to change by tomorrow, but want to have some fun with the new draft order.
of course. Moving on from that, though, we got our layups bold predictions. Last week we went 2 for 4, plus money, which is good. Starting off with my layup, I had Cincinnati money line versus Pittsburgh. That did happen. Skylar had number 3 Boise plus 11.5. Ended up being a 17-point game. So nothing on that one. This week I have Denver plus 8.5. Like I said, I think this game ends up being a 1-score game. Whether that feels like Buffalo has it the whole time or not, I don't know. But I'll say Denver plus 8.5.
I'm sticking with one of the college picks I just talked about. Penn State plus 1.5 against Notre Dame. I would have loved it even more if it was 3.5. But hey, I'm picking them to win outright. So giving me that 1 point, maybe they go for 2 or something like that. Just a little bit of cushion there. And should be a pretty good game.
Trust me, I've seen it. That 1 point buffer definitely helps. Last week, bold prediction, I had Minnesota moneyline versus Detroit on Sunday Night Football. We all know how that went. Did not happen. Skyler had Chicago plus 320 versus Green Bay. That did happen. It actually hurt me because I bet on Green Bay, but
Sorry, bud.
I should have known. This week, I have Washington over Tampa. I took them to win when we did our picks, so might as well stick with it here in plus money.
For my bold prediction, finally getting into some playoff football here, NFL football. I got the Rams over Minnesota, like we talked about earlier, plus 105 here, 105. Not bad for a team that won when they played earlier in the season. Not bad for a home team in the playoffs. Not bad for a division winner. I'm kind of playing the odds here with this one. Obviously, Minnesota could come out, be pissed off, just like Ohio State was in the college playoff. But I'm going with the Rams.
That's going to do it, though, for episode 226. Next week, we'll know what happens in Super Wildcard Weekend. We'll have, I wouldn't say divisional picks, but we'll talk about the divisional games. We'll talk about the Natty because we'll know that's going to be happening. We'll have a whole lot more interviews for all the teams that have not fired their head coaches or have fired their head coaches, actually. Maybe MLB. I keep on saying that. It feels like at the end of the episode.
Where will Arenado go?
Jesus. Back to St. Louis. Seems to be the only option at this point. But that'll do it. I saw a MLB.com article that said Francisco Lindor is better than Jeter in the 2000s. I said, wow.
Maybe his WAR is a little higher. I don't know where they got that from, though.
So they're probably pissing some people off saying that stuff. But yeah, I don't know.
Not gonna have more hits, that's for sure.
That's the captain, man.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry his DRS has dropped a little bit at the end of his career, guys, but I don't know about that.
Anyways, yeah. We'll see you guys next week for episode 227.
227. Let's go.
Let's go raid. I don't know.